It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
How many are taking notice of just how fast the great unraveling is accelerating on countless fronts, ecologically and geopolitically? The two are, in fact, inseparable. And what happens when there's no longer enough to go around? Yes, the law of the jungle, a Mad Max reality, at least until the entire ship goes down. Let's stare down some breaking bad news headlines, because the only chance we have of altering the wider horizon in the right direction is to fully face it first. From Mother Jones' Journal, things are moving so quickly as scientists study this, quote, very scary climate strategy. Gee, I wonder what they're referring to. What do you think? They say the controversial field of solar geoengineering is hitting its stride. Really? Let's continue with this report. Introducing aerosolized particles into the stratosphere, aka geoengineering, jet sprayed dispersions, could create, they say, a plethora of new unpredictable problems. You think? Possible negative impacts may include changing regional weather patterns, creating or shifting areas of drought, or regions that receive extreme precipitation. Sound like everything happening today? Of course it does, because it is. They continue, or altering tropospheric chemistry and ocean circulation patterns. Adding sulfate aerosols to the stratosphere would degrade the ozone layer, thereby increasing global cancer rates. The potential effects of solar radiation management are so large and wide-ranging as to implicate almost every aspect of life on the planet. No, let's correct that. It is every aspect of life on the planet, every single thread in the web of life. This is the greatest assault against creation ever launched by the human race, and the whole of the so-called climate science community, all of matrix media, every elected official, with very few exceptions, are still pretending, along with the population that wants too much to keep their heads in the sand, that this isn't happening in our skies and doing everything just described. And I'm not saying there's no other sources of damage. Please don't misinterpret what I'm saying here. I'm saying this source, this intentional intervention on top of all the other sources of damage, is a near-term, certain trajectory toward planetary omnicide, period. Let's continue. Climate chaos, new headline. New research suggests that humans are causing unprecedented shifts in rainfall patterns. That's from SciTech Daily. Again, for the record, the term caused by humans must include global climate engineering operations at the top of the list, but none of these matrix media reports will ever admit to that unless or until the population takes to the streets with their proverbial pitchforks and torches and demands the truth be told. The Science Daily report continues with this. A new study published in Science Journal reveals that human-induced climate change, again, no reference to climate engineering, but that's still a human activity, is it not? Is climate engineering not a human activity? So should not we include it in this definition? We should. Is increasing global rainfall variability, leading to more erratic and intense rainfall patterns. This change necessitates immediate adaptation strategies to mitigate its broad environmental and economic impacts. You cannot adapt to a planet that no longer supports life, and that is the trajectory we are on. I live in a forest that was thriving, absolutely thriving 20 years ago. That is silent, dead, crispy dry. In fact, it's so dry right now in my location in Northern California, it's worse than it has ever been, even at the end of a rainless summer and fall. So I have no idea what the next months are going to bring. Well, I do have an idea, likely more incinerations like the Park Fire. I'll get to that in a moment. We are in totally uncharted territory, and how many are right now still distracting themselves with endless polarizing, pumped out on matrix media issues that are designed to distract from the oncoming train? How many? This report continues, again from SciTech Daily. Worldwide rainfall is becoming increasingly erratic. Intense downpours are occurring more frequently, while dry periods seem to be lasting longer and becoming more severe. These shifts have raised concerns and prompted scientists to investigate the connections between climate change and these unpredictable rainfall patterns. Great. The eyes wide shut, clinically blind, so-called scientists are going to investigate. What a relief. Does anyone actually expect the so-called experts to tell the truth? No. Only when a fully awakened and justifiably enraged population demands the truth be told and holds all those who are either actively or passively a part of the cover-up legally and morally responsible for their crimes. And the effort to accomplish that awakening will take all of us. Can't be done by a few on behalf of the many. It will take all of us. Again, Northern California conditions like Death Valley. Now let me take that a step further. It's like living in hell. Off-the-chart heat, day and night, skies filled not just with toxic firestorm smoke, but also sprayed jet aerosol dispersions that anybody who bothers to look up and be observant can see happening. There's no natural clouds in our skies almost at all ever. And above it all, in our location, is the, quote, ridiculously resilient ridge of high pressure, the ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure heat dome that pushes the air mass down on top of everyone, holds the toxic smoke in. There's more reports on just how toxic the smoke is. They're coming out every week. All those reports I cover in this broadcast are new every week. And even though they are a continuation of the unfolding dilemmas on countless fronts, these are new ongoing reports, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So this high-pressure heat dome's holding the smoke down, prohibiting any rain from entering our region, upper-level winds and moisture circulating clockwise around that heat dome. So you see marine layer off the Pacific Northwest and California coast, but it doesn't come inland. And the moisture circulates around and above us. And this is part of the conveyor the climate engineers set up first in 2007, when the Arctic ice extent first started to crash radically. More on that in a moment, and that affects all of us. If you don't think it does, you're sadly mistaken. This is a very complex scenario, none of it in our best interest, none of it benevolent, all of it about power and control. So how long can these Death Valley-like conditions continue in Northern California? In fact, hellish conditions? Not much longer. Ecosystems are imploding. Links in the chain are breaking. Empty food shelves will come. The production in the California breadbasket this year will be abysmally low. Wait and see. Park fire update, the one that started south of me and covered half the distance from the fire start point to my location in 2 days. Covered about 25 to 30 miles in 2 days, heading straight north towards us. Thankfully, conditions changed. It's now not coming directly toward us, but that doesn't make me feel so much better when it's incinerating regions like Lassen Park, a beautiful ecosystem that keeps going up in flames. Whatever's left of it, likely by the end of this year, will be not much. And people are going about their lives like these forests are going to grow back. They're not. They're not. The trees aren't coming back. These areas that are scorched are now sterile. Hydrophobic soils. There's no new starts. There's no new starts even in the forest that's not burnt yet. I live in one. 20 years ago, new starts were everywhere. The surface of the ground under the fir trees looked like dog hair. There were so many new starts, new fir trees coming up on their own. Now there's nothing. And don't bother planting anything because it will not make it through the first year. It will likely not make it through the first month. You could plant it in the middle of winter and it might sit there dormant until they shut the rain off and the intense UV starts, the low atmospheric relative humidity sets in, drying out foliage and soils, and nothing makes it. Search the engineering wildfires section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org, please. Please learn about this most important aspect of climate engineering that is wreaking havoc around the globe. Let's keep going. Climate engineering isn't the only form of human insanity, by the way, that's trashing the planet at blinding speed, is it? The list is very, very long. And here's a snapshot of another factor that too many people cheerlead from the sidelines knowing nothing about it. From USA Today, 103 earthquakes in 1 week. What's going on in West Texas? ? Officials in Scurry County in West Texas declared a state of emergency after more than 100 earthquakes rocked that area. Let's add this. From the HoustonChronicle.com, fracking earthquakes are a devil's bargain Texas doesn't need. For those that still believe fracking is such a great idea, search and view the film Gasland for a serious reality check. And there's also thermal expansion, there's glacial rebound, there's many factors affecting the seismic activity right now, and certainly frequency transmissions are a major factor. How many nation states, after they make a decision that is not liked by the Western power structure end up immediately having off-the-chart earthquakes. Turkey's a good example, isn't it? Turkey, in the recent past, has thumbed its nose at NATO, and within days, swarms of earthquakes leveled parts of Turkey. Haiti's another. New Zealand's another. And Japan. About Japan, MIT even acknowledged for the 2007 earthquake that there was, quote, extremely anomalous atmospheric heating directly above the epicenter for 3 days prior to the quake. What would do that? An ionosphere heater that bounces its multi-million watt signal off a now reflective atmosphere from the climate intervention reflective elements, bouncing that signal off the atmosphere and back down into the strata. What happens when you microwave something long enough? It expands, thermal expansion. Something has to give. So the question then is commonly asked, why would the U.S. want to possibly inflict that kind of damage on Japan? I can state this. What the former highest-ranking military officer to ever tell the truth about 9/11, General Albert Stubblebine, what he told me, and I had numerous conversations with General Stubblebine, that Japan was allying with its regional partners, and the U.S. wanted to put, or Western powers, I should say, because who's controlling the U.S.? That's not hard to connect either, is it? When Congress, bought and paid for Matrix minions, gives 58 standing ovations to a specific individual, who's really running this country? But the bottom line is back to Japan. What I was told by General Stubblebine was Japan was allying with its regional partners, and Western powers wanted to put a shot across their bow, and I guess they did, didn't they? That's what he was told by his contacts at the Pentagon. Forgive me, I digress, but all of these elements are weapons of mass destruction that are then blamed on nature. That includes climate engineering, doesn't it? Whatever they do, just blame nature, no matter how obviously unnatural the event was, no matter how obviously unnatural our skies are. Here's another from Matrix Media that pretends weather warfare isn't raging in our skies. From the New York Times, scientist has a risky plan to cool Earth. There's growing interest, the Times says. Yes, let's all keep pretending that we're not seeing what we're seeing in our skies, and far too many people are doing just that. I hear from some people that seem to believe that everybody knows about this and realizes it's happening. It's not true. The majority still have their eyes wide shut, and that must change very, very soon, or we will be out of time. Here's more breaking headlines on the deluge, drought, firestorm scenarios that are all inseparable from climate intervention operations. These are headlines Matrix Media hardly makes mention of as they pump out perpetual political theater. Apocalyptic floods in Vermont. That's from UK Guardian. From the UK Daily Mail, US state told to prepare for life-threatening flash flood. They're talking about New Mexico, which got droughted out, firestormed, and now it's being wiped out with deluge. And that's a typical dot-by-dot scenario for destroying regions. Blame it on nature. From the upside.com, home insurers hit with the worst underwriting loss of the century. And for the record, this is just the beginning. Just one thread of the wider horizon unraveling, not just ecologically, but societally. Across the board, insurance cancellations are coming. Disruptions with them. Far too many believe that the Ponzi scheme stock market will save us all. Printed money. Complete Ponzi scheme. Far too many others believe that shiny metals, gold and silver coins, will save them. Neither is true. What matters most at this late hour is fully focusing our collective efforts on plugging the biggest hole in the bottom of the boat, exposing and halting the relentless spraying and microwaving of our skies. Life on Earth is in the near-term balance. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report, The End of the World as We Know It broadcast, brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of global climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. Reaching a critical mass of awareness is the only way forward in this fight. We must reach a critical mass by starting a conversation on climate engineering that leads people to a credible source of data. Geoengineeringwatch.org will continue all of our efforts to be the go-to source on covert climate engineering operations. A conversation on climate engineering can easily be started with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials available on our homepage. We pass on our printed materials, very high quality, very effective key to the door, for less than our cost of producing and shipping. Our only goal to succeed in this mission, to stop this insanity. If we can first fully expose weather warfare, we have a chance of stopping it. From the Weather Channel Climate Engineering Cover-Up Agency, heat burst causes nighttime temperature rise of nearly 20 degrees in Nebraska. Listen to this and listen to the explanation for it. A temperature spike of nearly 20 degrees occurred in western Nebraska early Tuesday morning from a relatively rare phenomenon called a heat burst. As long as they tell you it's happened before, people think, oh, no big deal. Move on, nothing to see here. That's commonly used to cover up what's completely unnatural. The temperature rose from 73 degrees to 92.3 degrees in 2 hours. This is in the middle of the night. That temperature rise happened at a weather station in Ogallala, Nebraska. That's from 12:15 a.m. Mountain Time to 2 a.m. Mountain Time. The temperature then fell back down into the 70s immediately after. Other weather stations in the area also saw notable overnight temperature increases, including one that jumped to 94 degrees, over 20-degree rise. And they say thunderstorms were to blame for this strange overnight temperature rise. They can tell the public anything they want, and they're laughing it up behind closed doors. How many atrocities have occurred in plain sight with ridiculous narratives to explain them away, and people buy that? How many atrocities have been pushed on society with countless cover-ups that are completely detached from any semblance of reality or truth, yet the vast majority accepts the lies. When will this change? Pressing on, from Fox Weather, the hottest place on Earth just got a bit hotter. They're referring to Death Valley. How hot was it? It was the hottest July ever recorded there, Death Valley. I believe the average combined day and night temperature was about 108 degrees, which means average daytime highs were pushing probably close to 130. And even here in Redding, California, the formerly lush Northern California, Redding, a city known for its trees, we had a temperature recently of 121 degrees, according to AccuWeather. It was 10 degrees above the former record. How long does anyone think this kind of progression can continue before the planet can't support life anymore? Crops already crashing. Let's continue. From theconversation.com. The climate is changing so fast that we haven't seen how bad extreme weather could get. From the report, the rapidly changing climate means we have not necessarily experienced the extremes that modern-day atmospheric and oceanic warmth can produce. For the record, that conclusion is a gross underestimation of what's coming, indeed what's already unfolding. And on top of the carbon fuel carnival on planet Earth, now add climate engineering and nuclear war. That should finish us off. Here's another important reminder. In addition to the current endless list of unfolding weather catastrophes around the world, the most active hurricane season on record has also been scheduled. Of course, Earth's now record hot oceans can and will spawn hurricanes. Could atmospheric pressure zones be created or augmented in order to help spawn or further fuel the strength of a cyclone? Certainly. U.S. cyclone modification operations, hurricane modification, first started in 1947. How far do you think they've come since? Available data indicates that rotations are kept from reaching maximum strength until they are close enough to landfall for land-based frequency transmission facilities to most effectively steer the storm path. They're difficult to steer if they're at full strength over the ocean because SBX radar, if you look that up, SBX radar looks like a giant golf ball on an oil platform. There's smaller units on top of U.S. military ships. These are also used for frequency manipulation of storms, but much easier with land-based facilities. So we see this last-minute rapid intensification now becoming the norm. On that note, here's a headline to consider from the ManilaTimes.net. Listen carefully because this puzzle piece fits. Typhoons forming closer to coast due to climate change, new study states. No mention of climate engineering, no mention of frequency transmission manipulation. No surprise. Yes, also now the norm. Just label every and any climate anomaly and catastrophe with the blanket climate change blame, with never so much as a mention of the climate engineering elephant in the equation. And this doesn't mean the climate isn't broken, because it is. This doesn't mean that there isn't an endless list of devastating human activities breaking it, because there are. What it means is that the most massive climate disrupting part of the puzzle of all, climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare, continues to be omitted and ignored by all official sources, all major media, and almost all so-called elected officials. This omission is nothing less than criminal. And sadly, the majority of populations remain all too willing to go along with pretending climate engineering isn't raging in our skies. So far, for far too many, facing the unspun truth is simply too terrifying. So again, this question: are cyclones, aka hurricanes, being manipulated? Search geoengineeringwatch.org hurricanes. Examine some of our reports. You won't like what you learn from the proof presented. It is inarguable. Next question: is the planetary loot, plunder, pillage, and pollute party nearing the end? Short answer: yes. We're circling the drain. Here's a headline on that front from Euronews.org. Earth Overshoot Day. Humanity burns through planet's yearly resources in 7 months. And though this headline sounds bad, reality is worse by far. The 7 months worth of planet-produced resource equation is made with the assumption that the planet is still fully functional, except that it isn't, not even close, and it's becoming less functional by the day. Where does that leave us? Terminal velocity into a brick wall. On that theme, this footnote from Fortune.com. Americans are cutting back on groceries to pay for air conditioning. Here's a question: how long does anyone possibly think this equation can last? And about the crops that are dying in the field due to the extreme heat and UV, are we going to shade and air condition them by burning even more carbon fuel to provide the energy for this air conditioning, and thus creating even more atmospheric heat? With climate engineering and its destruction raging on overhead. And about the fish, another pillar in the now collapsing food supply chain, also superheating and dying in rapidly deoxygenating waters. Are we going to start air conditioning them also? Too late. Most are already gone. The rest are contaminated. All of them. No exceptions. Peer-reviewed science study proves it. Again, this reminder: 500 locations of wild-caught fish in the U.S., eating one of them, equivalent to drinking a month's worth of toxic water. Think about that. Ocean fish, different forms of contamination, but all of it contaminated. The writing is indeed on the wall. It couldn't be more clear to any that have summoned the courage to face it. The last best chance we have to at least buy time at this late hour is to first focus on exposing and halting global climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. Then the endless list of other extremely destructive human activities must be dealt with, or we will all perish. Not somewhere out into the future, but in the extremely near term. And that conclusion isn't speculation or conjecture. It's a mathematical certainty. Turning away from it won't make it go away. Short of a complete course correction, our days are numbered. From Inside Climate News: supercharged by climate change, Western megafires explode simultaneously. They say big fires everywhere across the Western U.S. and Canada. A series of heat waves, droughts, and strong winds boosting the growth of fires this season. Again, there is no legitimate discussion of anything climate related without first and foremost addressing climate engineering. And in the case of the wildfires, that can be most completely hung around the neck of climate engineering. I'm not negating all other sources of damage to the climate, but we know from the laws of physics that a warming climate must create more overall rain, and that is not happening. Why not? Because our atmosphere is filled with light-scattering, sun-blocking, desiccant particles that are totally disrupting the rain cycle. That's what I started the beginning of this broadcast with. The single greatest hydrological cycle disrupting factor of all is climate engineering. Period. Data is inarguable on that front, and how many people are still ignoring it, pretending that there's just some unintended consequence happening and nobody has any sway over it. We have leaders of countries on the floor of the UN stating NATO cutting off their precipitation. It's not a coincidence that all of the countries that were targeted after 9/11, all the Middle Eastern countries, all of them went through a once in 1,000 year drought, cutting off their precipitation, disrupting their food supply, thus destabilizing their populations, making them easier to manipulate. This is the crown jewel weapon of the military-industrial complex, and for Americans to think our government, as if it's really our government, what a joke that is, that they wouldn't do this to us, time to wake up. Way past time to wake up. From resilience.org, this new headline: wildfires, grief, and paralysis. From that report, what our brains can't appear to grasp is how the scale of human industry now shapes these monsters and multiplies their daunting numbers. Some call it overshoot, and others call it the meta-crisis. This awkward and inadequate term includes everything from diabolical technological complexity to the exhaustion of soils and oceans. Yes, there it is. Quote, diabolical technological complexity. And at the top of that list, so-called solar radiation management, stratospheric aerosol injection, cloud albedo enhancement, only a few of the terms given to what should be labeled climate disruption operations. Wildfires in U.S. and Canada. Next question. Are the constant firestorms strategically manipulated to enhance atmospheric particulate loading for the climate engineers? The power structure is beyond desperate to mask the meltdown of the Arctic sea ice. Are they willing to incinerate the planet's last remaining life support systems to accomplish their agendas? The answer to that question has long since been crystal clear to any that don't have their eyes wide shut, and both polar regions are in total meltdown, total global sea ice record low, sea ice volume record low, and for those that don't understand it, this is the air conditioners of the planet. How long does your food stay edible when all the ice in your ice chest goes away? Not long. For a deeper understanding of this complex equation of how the geoengineers are utilizing, facilitating wildfires, source of ignition, separate subject completely. I won't intertwine the two. What matters in this equation is what is setting the template for these fires to burn with such ferocity, and climate engineering is at the core of that equation. For a deeper understanding that I don't have time to go into on this broadcast of what these complexities are, it will shock you to the marrow. Please search and view Wildfires Serve Geoengineering Agenda. Help us to share that most important geoengineeringwatch.org video. From MSN.com. Scientists uncover concerning impacts of large wildfires. It appears these fires are creating their own fire weather. From that report, large wildfires may be generating weather conditions that favor more fires. The author of a new study suggests more prescribed burns might help prevent giant future fires. Has nothing to do with that. Yes, if you burn the whole forest down before a bigger firestorm gets there, you'll have less fire. But the whole composition of the forest and the atmosphere are completely different. So those that keep falling back on that, we're just not burning off forest enough, and that's why we're having these big fires, that is a blatant, glaring lie. I speak from firsthand experience of 6 habitat restoration programs and years of burning solo in the forest. Forests that have been radically altered by totally irresponsible logging, now a completely altered atmosphere chemistry, altered soils, sterile root systems, intense UV baking the trees from the top down. All these grabbing at straws, so-called solutions from the so-called scientists are just as off base as the Brazil-sized balloons, the putting space mirrors up, covering the poles with reflective tarps. Idiocy, total idiocy from the so-called science community. They say California has been particularly hard hit this year. That's true. Nearly 20 times more acres have burnt so far this year compared to the same time last year. California needs to allow more frequent small fires, they say, to reduce fuel availability. Again, total stupidity. That is not the problem. That's not the problem. Or we have former Trump administration official Ryan Zinke, who came to the North State when the fires were raging during that administration, saying the way to prevent fires is just cut the forest down before they get there. Just clear cut. I did a whole video on this. There's nothing left after these clear cuts. Nothing. So there's nothing to burn. Problem solved, right? Just eliminate the forest. No, not a solution. And then they say this. This is from MSN.com. Doing things such as installing a heat pump or a solar panel can not only slash bills, but also limit planet warming gases entering the atmosphere. That's not going to save us. Please view the documentary Planet of the Humans, if you want to know how unrenewable, so-called renewable energy is. Yes, it's better than the outright burning of carbon fuels. I admit that. But it's not going to save us. How much carbon fuel does anybody think it takes to build a 900-foot tall wind turbine that is completely dysfunctional? Lots of those 900-foot tall wind turbines. That's not, quote, renewable energy. And also evaporation rates are increasingly off the scale, especially under the ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure heat domes. Often silvery white skies under the heat domes, but those are still filled with atmospheric aerosols that either blow in, or there's often a light, shorter, seeming to disperse trail, can be bright, that after a day of this, you have silvery white skies, morning silvery white. You don't see the very defined grid pattern spraying going on, but it can still be going on, typically is under the high pressure heat dome. Now let's add increasingly toxic firestorm smoke with often aerosol dispersions taking place directly above or actually within the upper smoke canopy. We've captured this on time-lapse film footage. What's that about? That's certainly not benevolent. These are incendiary particles being dispersed directly above a wildfire. And of course, there's the mythical Sahara dust yarn that's now so commonly used to cover the tracks of climate-engineered filth-filled skies. Park fire cool down for the North State. What happened after the Park fire first blew up into 350,000 acres in a couple days? Radical cool down. How many know that wildfire smoke is largely water vapor as well, that all incinerated out of the forest and now it's in the skies? There's particulate in that, of course, too, but how many know that? And are they chemically nucleating this smoke canopy as they do atmospheric moisture flows? And the answer appears to be yes. Cool down was about 30 degrees in my location. That shouldn't happen from just a smoke canopy. And you could hear the aircraft back and forth above as if I'm at the end of an LAX runway. What are they doing? They're that desperate to use chemical ice nucleating cloud seeding operations over even a smoke canopy to temporarily cool the surface. Anyone remember how much it cooled down in the northeastern U.S. when the Canadian wildfires blew up last year and the smoke was pushed down and held in the ground for days and days with an ionosphere heater created high pressure heat dome, and how much that again cooled everything down? Are they indeed dispersing more toxic elements on these smoke canopies? Answer appears to be yes. What are we breathing? What's the totality of what we're breathing? Let's add this. From the UK Guardian, as wildfires rage, what is the smoke doing to our health and bodies? Question mark. They say scientists are discovering just how toxic wildfire smoke actually is to the body. Wildfire smoke, they say, contains a toxic brew of compounds. It certainly does. And what else is being sprayed on top of that smoke canopy? Again, a recent study conducted in California attributed more than 50,000 premature deaths to wildfire smoke exposure. Again, that's from the UK Guardian. 50,000 premature deaths in California alone. They say there's evidence that pollution from wildfires can move through the placenta and impact a developing fetus's brain, lungs, and liver. And we live in smoke here in Northern California. It's now becoming an annual season, the smoke season, where it looks like you live at the base of a volcano, sun's red in the sky at night, and you breathe it every single day. How much damage is that doing to all of us, including, as this article states, unborn children? From MSN.com, California park fire scorches the earth, wreaking havoc on surface area bigger than all of LA. It's not out yet, and winds are starting to pick up. The park fire has caused significant environmental damage, destroying vast areas of forest, wildlife habitats, and natural resources. The loss of vegetation not only affects the local ecosystem, but also contributes to long-term issues like soil erosion and reduced air quality. Many animals have lost their habitats and their lives. That seems so sterile. So many, unquantifiable. We've lost 70% of Earth's wildlife populations conservatively in the last 40 years alone. 70%. My forests are silent. I went over in last week's broadcast my dear friend the doe and her fawn dead, too hot. And now I see very few here. No bear scat. Used to have bears in the front yard all the time. One lonely hen turkey that wanders around where there used to be dozens and dozens. Why do people go on about their lives as if nothing is wrong? The planet is crashing. From AccuWeather, long-term exposure to wildfire smoke linked to increased risk of dementia. Diagnosis, new study finds, no surprise there. Breathing in toxins and particulates such as PM2.5 has been shown in studies to increase amyloid in the brain, and these particles create unfavorable environments for our brain cells, contributing to inflammation and damage. When you breathe in PM2.5, the report says it actually gets absorbed into your bloodstream through your lungs. California's wildfires have been increasing in size and frequency, producing vast amounts of smoke that contribute to what state boards call a, quote, growing public health problem. New research links the long-term exposure of this wildfire smoke to brain health, suggesting that it greatly increases Alzheimer's, dementia, other downstream neurological diseases. The report states much more of this is happening from, again, smoke exposure as compared to other sources of air pollution. Again, we filmed blanket aerosol spraying on top of the Paradise Fire. What else is raining down through this smoke that we are not being told about? And as far as the particle size, climate engineering particles are nanoparticles, far smaller than PM2.5, so no official agency is even looking for those, let alone disclosing them. So much deception, mind-numbing, part of the plan. Thin the herd slowly, so as to avoid panicking them before the moment of impact. Switching gears, let's go to the bottom of the world for an overall picture. How cold is it at the bottom of the world in the middle of the Antarctic winter? Not so much. Here's a headline from this week, Washington Post. Antarctic temperatures soar 50 degrees above normal in long-lasting heat wave. 50 degrees above normal. From Environmental Health News, Antarctica experiences unprecedented midwinter heat wave. Don't hear about that on Matrix Media, do we? Let's add this from the Sydney Morning Herald. The polar vortex is bringing icy temperatures across southern Australia. How exactly does that happen while Antarctica is in meltdown? Let's add this puzzle piece from ABC Australia. Record 50 degrees C temperature increase over Antarctica to shift Australia's weather patterns. The ABC report then states a sudden stratospheric warming event like this has never before been observed during an Antarctic winter. This is called last-ditch desperate effort to create the illusion of cold for the inhabitants of Australia while the planet descends into total meltdown. Push that air from Antarctica, superheat that region. Ice melts, of course, even faster. The controllers of the Matrix don't care about the consequences of their actions, even to themselves. How clear can that be at this point? Because I've heard so many people, it's their final fallback of denial. They, the proverbial they, aka those who print the money, those who control militaries, just they control governments. It's certainly not our elected officials controlling governments. They wouldn't do this to themselves. I hear that so often. They already have, again and again. We're not dealing with sanity. We're dealing with power and control addicts. Let's press on. Japan heat wave from thewatchers.org. Japan blistered in hottest July on record for second summer in a row from NHK Japan. Heat wave expected to continue in many parts of Japan. Heat stroke alerts issued. From the Japan Times, Japan's extreme heat is causing a rethink of school sports. It's going to cause a rethink of how you survive soon. From KFGO.com, China had its hottest month in observed modern history in July. All over the world, how much of this do we need? How many headlines do we need before people realize there's a massive problem and climate engineering is making it far worse, not better? And when will these so-called environmental groups tell the whole truth? And the other side of the fence also needs to tell the truth. Many forms of damage to the planet, dire damage. But everyone needs to build a bridge in the fight for climate engineering, the single most destructive human activity of all, which is not just climate engineering. That's far too dignified. This is using weather as a weapon to control and cull the herd as the planet implodes. Let's call it what it is. Egypt heat waves, India heat waves going on right now. Here's another one. Caribbean's heat wave, another record hot night in the Caribbean. Record warm nights rising twice as fast as daytime highs. The list goes on and on. In summary, this new report from Yale360.com. As world warms, global heat deaths are grossly undercounted. Again, that word-for-word report from Yale360.com. Yes, alter statistics, downplay the deaths. Don't want to panic the herd before the moment of impact, do we? And what now all too often follows heat, drought, and firestorms? Devastating deluge. China, from devastating drought to catastrophic deluge. Look at the films online of the flooding in China. It is truly horrific. And about the ongoing weather warfare, as global tensions increase radically and former behind-the-curtain cooperation disintegrates, who's doing what to who with weather warfare at this point? How can we know? Bouncing back to headlines on planetary meltdown from the Washington Post, 4 hottest days ever recorded raise fears of our planet nearing, quote, tipping points. Too late for that. We blew past those 2 decades ago. As global temperatures spiked to their highest levels in recorded history, ambulances were screaming through the streets of Tokyo, carrying scores of people who had collapsed amid an unrelenting heat wave. A monster typhoon was emerging from the scorching waters of the Pacific Ocean. By the end of the week, the 4 hottest days ever observed by scientists. These extraordinary global temperatures mark the culmination of an unprecedented global hot streak that has stunned even researchers who spent their whole career studying climate change. The broken records come on the heels of 13 straight months of unprecedented temperatures. We knew this was coming at geoengineeringwatch.org. I've been stating this for 15 years. What about all the sites and sources that are still ranting coming ice age, global cooling? Please tell the truth. And please connect climate engineering to this, which even so-called academia still refuses to do. We all need to come together on the common ground of truth, the whole truth, not part of it here and there, the whole truth. The planet's in total meltdown, and climate engineering in the attempt to mask it and use weather as a weapon is further fueling the fire. This report from the Post continues. Almost 2,000 weather stations around the planet notched new daily high temperature records over the last 7 days, according to the National Centers for Environmental Information. Humanity faces conditions unlike anything our species has ever known. That's the fact of the matter. The unprecedented amount of heat-trapping carbon in Earth's atmosphere is at its highest level in more than 3 million years. And what else is in our atmosphere that has never been there before? Not in the entire geologic history of the planet. Toxic light-scattering heavy metal and polymer particles. No one officially admitting to that. It's a Russian roulette wheel of climate devastation, the report states, with a fully loaded gun, so to speak. There's no place to hide from what's already unfolding at blinding speed. Let's add this from the UK Guardian. Extreme, quote, heat dome hitting Olympics. Impossible without global heating. It's impossible without the ionosphere heaters that are augmenting the heat domes as well. Climate change, they say, crashed the Olympics this week. Scorching temperatures in Mediterranean countries and North Africa already causing increased in premature deaths. Also the particulate matter doing the same, which I spoke of earlier. So many factors in this equation. And the giant elephant in all of it not being admitted to. Climate intervention operations. From carbonbrief.org, State of the Climate 2024. 2024 now likely to be the warmest year on record, as I stated in previous broadcasts. This super hot summer will be the coldest summer you ever experience, however many more any of us get to experience if we stay on the current course. And by the way, if you're in the eastern half of the U.S. or you're in parts of Scotland and UK and it's cold, cold, cold where you are because they're chemically nucleating the cloud moisture, those locations are not a snapshot of the entire world. The eastern half of the U.S. lower 48 that's getting constant scattered rain showers is only 1% of the Earth's surface area. That is not indicative of the state of the planet. And the so-called drought monitor is still not showing any drought where I'm at in Northern California, and it is the worst it has ever been here, ever. Fuel moisture record low. And yet they show drought in some of the areas in the East Coast that are getting rain over and over and over. They don't even care about the reality of any statistics they show anymore because they know that most will believe whatever they're told. And that needs to change. People need to start using their God-given sense of reason or we're not going to be here long. No one will get out alive on the current course. And you can quote me on that. You're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast, installment number 469, August 3rd, 2024. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations known as geoengineering. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour can be found on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. Geoengineering Watch wishes to express our deepest gratitude to those that have helped us to expand our reach and our voice in this desperate last-hour effort to sound the alarm, and that includes all the dedicated activists that, in spite of whatever challenges they face in their life, are helping us to the best of their ability to move this fight forward. If you're on our email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities. That is our best tool, the best one we have, along with our printed materials, which I'll get to in a moment, which we pass on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. We have to use tools to help us move this fight forward. And The Dimming is very, very close to clicking over the 20 million mark right now. Thanks to all those that helped us to circulate this incredibly important film that we made available for free the moment it was done, and free still always will be. The best way to share is by circulating the direct link to The Dimming by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment, all of which helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience. About reaching those that still aren't seeing what's happening in our skies, one way. Start a conversation with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials, which can be found on our homepage. Our only goal, to provide activists what they need to move this fight forward. As I stated a moment ago, our extremely high-quality printed materials we pass on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. I live for the day when this insanity in our sky is exposed and halted and the planet is allowed to respond on its own to the damage done. I literally live for that day. I eat, sleep, and breathe this fight 7 days a week for longer than I can remember. I can't remember my former life. I literally can't. This is all I do, and I will not stop until I drop or until I accomplish that goal. We have Geoengineering Watch hoodies to go with our Geoengineering Watch shirts. That also starts conversations. Photos of both are on our homepage. We have scannable business cards, bumper stickers, all effective tools to strike up a conversation on the climate engineering issue. Again, a critical mass, only way forward in this fight. If we can accomplish that, and all those who are in a position to help more realize they are going down on the ship with us, now we have an army of the awakened. And that is the only way we can fight this battle. And those carrying out these programs, especially in our military, realize they're being lied to. They're not doing something benevolent, not something good for the planet. They are, in fact, exterminating their fellow countrymen, others around the world, and their own posterity. We need to wake them up as soon as we possibly can. If you're willing to share a picture of yourself with a Geoengineering Watch shirt or hoodie, ideally in some crowded location, please send your photos so that we can post it as part of our activist compilation, which is part of our materials page. The images encourage others to make their voices heard in this all-important battle to sound the alarm. We are rapidly running out of time. Again, my deepest gratitude to all those that are helping to move this fight forward. Please bear with me. I'm going to burn through as many headlines as I can, as fast as I can. If you want to know about that specific headline, I will cite the source. You can look it up and learn more. I'm trying to give a general, bigger picture. From MSN.com, heat dome continues. It will get even hotter in southern Europe. From IranInternational.com, Iran's energy crisis worsens amid scorching heat. From the Japan Times, for aging Japan, a troubling link between heat and dementia. From the UK Guardian, asphalt burns delirium body bags. Extreme heat overwhelms ERs, emergency rooms, across U.S. From the Washington Post, extreme heat is wilting and burning forests. Yes, so is the intense UV radiation from the now destroyed ozone layer and the incendiary dust floating down through the sky from the climate engineering operations and the now increased dry lightning strikes because of climate engineering operations, creating the static buildup and reducing precipitation. Again, search the engineering wildfires section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. From DW.com, it's DW in Germany. Will a heat wave in Eastern Europe upset global food supply? Short answer, yes. From Bloomberg, Dubai's brush with heat that feels like 60 C, that's about 140 plus degrees, shows dangers ahead. That's a gross understatement. Catastrophe is already looming over us. From the UK Guardian, extreme heat poses, quote, real risk to Spain's mass tourism industry. Can't have that, can we? As the planet goes down in flames, we're worried about tourism. Next, from the ArizonaDailySun.com, is climate change killing the Colorado River? Here's my question. Would it be much more accurate to ask, is climate engineering killing the Colorado River and countless other rivers and waterways? This is a complex question with answers that are alarming to the core. Please search and review the engineering drought section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org to learn what most would rather not know. Here's another question. Those polar skies we see that are packed with climate engineering aerosols for so many decades that most think the bizarre opaque skies with full halos around the sun are normal. They're not normal. From MSN.com, Arctic warming plays a devastating role in accelerating global climate change. Climate engineering is not mitigating the meltdown of the planet. In the effort to mask it, it is further fueling it and contaminating everything in the process. This MSN report then states, warming permafrost is a silent assassin. As the planet continues to warm, MSN says the permafrost regions are experiencing temperatures that are increasing at a pace 3 to 4 times higher than the global average. This does not bode well for the human race. Please search Siberian methane craters. Methane is exploding, thawing and exploding into the atmosphere. And this has put us on a very, very dangerous near-term trajectory. From SciTech Daily, warning, Arctic's last ice area faces meltdown. New research indicates that summer sea ice could soon become a relic of the past. Temperatures today mirror those of 10,000 years ago when similar conditions led to the melting of this ice. The potential disappearance of this ice could have profound effects on both the climate and ecosystems. No, not could, not may, not might. It will have profound effects on the climate and ecosystems. When the polar ice blows apart and a BOE occurs, that's a blue ocean event, possibly a double BOE, north and south poles, at absolute minimum, the current paradigm is over, and we are so perilously close to just such a moment. Don't believe it? Doesn't matter. Denial won't stop what's coming, and it won't stop the power structure's ever more desperate responses to unfolding events. Next pressing question, how much time do we have before World War III? Or more clearly, is it already well underway? Second question, what core sources of unrestrained power and aggression are doing their best to kickstart World War III? That blank isn't hard to fill in either. The same sources of endless money printing power that is ultimately behind what is taking place in our skies, of culling the herd in countless covert ways. And for the record, Iran is the only country that has openly spoken out against climate engineering operations on the floor of the UN, on film, on the record. Also for the record, Iran hasn't invaded any other country for about 250 years. Does this mean I'm a big fan of Iran? No. Does this mean I agree with all of their customs? No. This is not like George Bush theatrically standing on the deck of the ship saying you're either with us or with the terrorists. What a moronic statement that is. And anybody who could go along with such idiocy needs to dig deep and rethink their entire perspective of what life is and what it's about. What it means, everything that I'm stating and the facts I just cited, it's the truth. And the truth is the truth. Far too many Americans continue to gulp down the official propaganda, the official lies about who did what to who and why. Decades of proven outright lies, from 9/11 to WMD in Iraq that never existed, to the Vietnam Gulf of Tonkin incident, which was the excuse to invade Vietnam. And whenever new lies are dished up from the powers that shouldn't be, how many blindly wave their banners in full support of the same core of cancer and control that has been at the reins longer than most would dare to believe, that, again, is behind what's happening in our skies? Chaos, conflict, and carnage is their stock and trade. On that note, from YNETnews.com, U.S. deploys at least 12 warships to Middle East amid soaring tensions. The U.S. has deployed at least 12 warships to the Middle East, including the aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt, amphibious assault teams, and over 4,000 Marines and sailors in response to escalating tensions in the region. Again, I ask, will instigating global conflict be one of the final cards played by the manipulators of the Matrix? A last act of desperation as unfolding biosphere and climate collapse can no longer be hidden. with climate engineering further fueling that fire. As countries around the world increasingly collapse into failed states, as food shelves empty out, as the web of life completely unravels, why would we think otherwise? The manipulators of the matrix are, and long since have been, maneuvering toward playing the global conflict card. It's what they do. It's what they have always done, carrying out obvious and factually inarguable atrocities in plain sight, knowing full well they only need to invent a narrative that pretends to justify their actions, knowing that the vast majority of the public in first world nations are more than willing to remain distracted with constant bread and circus. And about those in third world nations, they're simply trying to survive another day. Even more alarming than trying to grasp the depth of global controller moral depravity is trying to comprehend the depth of denial lurking in the masses. In the words of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. The list of non-linear and immediate threats we face is long indeed. Climate and biosphere collapse, which of course includes crops and fisheries. The inevitable meltdown of some 442 nuclear power plants around the world. The likelihood of coming nuclear exchanges. There is no sanity in this equation. There never was. But now, it's on a scale that holds all life on Earth in the balance. And even now, as the proverb goes, Nero fiddles while Rome burns, bread and circus till the brutal bitter end. But is it yet possible, even at this late hour, to make a quantum leap in the right direction? Is it yet possible to at least buy time? Isn't that worth fighting for? And whatever the outcome, to know at your core that you did your best to do your best is a life worth living. We must prioritize, starting with fully exposing and halting what we can't hide from, what is not only decimating the planet's last remaining life support systems, but also contaminating virtually everything, global climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. If we collectively did all we could to credibly sound the alarm and ask others to do the same, we could at minimum trigger a shockwave around the world. We could alter the current paradigm. It's now or never. Please check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for specific instructions on how you can help to move this fight forward. Sharing credible data from a credible source is key. Stand your ground as if you were fighting for your very life and the lives of your children, for indeed you are. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.